The sheriff goes into a rage when he gets back to the castle. He knows Moira is alive, and he knows she is with Robin. He decides to raise the bounty on Robin to 10 pounds. The resistance stays busy over the next month, raiding and looting supplies between King John and his allies. Soon the word of Robin Hood and his merry men sweep through the kingdom, and relations become strained. The king becomes infuriated and demands the sheriff bring him Robin or suffer public humiliation in the stocks. Ada has recovered from her injuries and taken to many of the children, tending to them as their parents help with duties around the camp. Moira comes down from the hut where she and Robin reside and approach him at a table where the men are trying to figure out the best way to get the stolen supplies to the people. Guards have been on constant patrol inside and outside the castle gates. They are checking everything that comes in and goes into the city, says Duncan. Word is the sheriff has jailed more than a dozen of the men who were believed to be bribed by the resistance, says Little John. I think he's trying to take advantage of your good nature and lure you out. The sheriff knows you won't let those people rot in the dungeon. One of the men signal an incoming wagon. Robin and the men take up arms and head to the trail. Moira follows. What are you doing? Asks Robin. Going with you. What does it look like? I'm not going to let you have all the fun. Oh, how I love you, he says adoringly, as they hide, waiting for the wagon to draw near. When it approaches, the men jump out of hiding, frightening the horses and scaring the driver. Oh, dear God, no, pleads the man. Moira looks at the man confused. Friar? He removes his hood as he sets his sights on her. Moira, my child. He climbs off the wagon and gives her a hug. You know this man? asks Little John. This is Friar Tuck. He preaches at the church just inside the castle gates, she replies. What are you doing out here alone? I'm taking my mead to the next town over. Mead, you say? Questions Duncan, walking over to the back of the wagon. And what is a man of the cloth doing making mead? asks Little John. I may be a man of the cloth, good sir, but I am still a man, responds the friar. Robin, I think I may have found a solution to the problem you were having, says Moira. They invite the friar back to their camp and listen as Moira explains. The friar is well respected among the nobles and people. We will allow him safe passage through these woods with his mead, and upon his return we will fill his mead pots with food and gold for the townsfolk. Friar, are you up to the task? asks Robin. He nods, agreeing to the terms. Wait a minute. We can't let him just ride through here. It will draw attention if he comes and goes without notice through these woods, interjects Duncan. And what do you propose we do, Duncan? Beat up a man of the cloth? asks Robin sarcastically. No, but maybe some gratuity should be in order. He gestures towards the mead. The friar laughs and walks over to the wagon, pulling off 2 clay pots full of mead. Here you are, my son. To safe travels and helping the people of Nottingham, he says, blessing the pots. The men spend the night drinking by the fire and singing songs. Moira spots Ada walking off into the woods with Will. Those two seem to be taking a liking to each other, I see, she mentions to Robin. He smiles and gives her a kiss before taking another drink. Dance with me, he says. You've obviously had too much to drink, she jokes. Oh, get up, he says, pulling her to her feet. He starts swinging her around and dancing the best he can, having had a little more than he could handle of drink. Little John laughs. Oi, Duncan, why don't you play a slow tune before Robin Hood becomes Robin of the Flame and falls into the fire? Everyone laughs as he struggles to stand up straight. If I didn't know any better, John, I'd think you were jealous of my moves, responds Robin. With moves like that, it's a wonder why Moira hasn't whisked you off to bed before you hurt yourself, laughs Little John. That actually sounds like a great idea. He hoists Moira over his shoulders. Good night, lads. Robin! Put me down! Robin stumbles away, carrying her to their living quarters. Well, now, where were we? Says Little John, starting up their tune again. The friar leaves first thing the next morning to deliver his mead. Moira bids him well before going with Ada into the wood to harvest some berries. You and Will seem to have taken a liking, she mentions. We're just enjoying each other's company is all, says Ada, blushing. You're an awful liar, Ada, says Moira. He's a good man. So he gets your approval? She asks. My approval? Since when do you need my approval to court someone? Laughs Moira. Since he asked me to marry him, informs Ada. Moira's face lights up. Marry him? She exclaims. He asked me last night, she says, trying to contain her excitement. He wanted to ask the friar to make it official when he comes back from his delivery. Moira hugs Ada joyfully. I most definitely approve, if he makes you happy, and I know he does. A few days later, the friar returns and agrees to marry the young couple. It was just before sundown when they had the ceremony. Deep in the woods, several of the camp's women created an archway of branches and vines. It was covered in flowers, and the sunset through the trees made it look like something out of a fairy tale. Moira had managed to make a dress for Ada out of some silk cloth they confiscated in a raid. The friar stood witness as they exchanged vows. By the powers invested in me by the Lord, I now pronounce you Mr. and Miss Scarlet. You, sir, may now kiss your bride, acknowledged the friar. While the people of Sherwood celebrated their union, King John was not happy with the results of the sheriff in his search for Robin Hood. What is keeping you from bringing me this Robin Hood? Questions the king to the sheriff. Just burn down the forest and flush him out. Your Highness, starts the sheriff. No more excuses. I want his head, and I want it now, pouts the king. Their arrangement with the friar works out perfectly. He comes once a week, bringing mead and carrying supplies back to the citizens of Nottingham. After services at the church, he discreetly passes out supplies to those in attendance before heading into the city streets and praying for those who are not at the service. Good day, friar. Might I walk with you? Asked the sheriff. You may. Are you in need of guidance? Oh, not in the holy sense. As you are aware, King John has been having an issue with raiders commandeering his trade with the neighboring towns. You take your mead through Sherwood on deliveries, do you not? He questions. Aye, but it is not without its disadvantages. I gain safe passage only by paying a toll of mead to the marauders. I see, the sheriff says as his thought deepens. I shall leave you to your work then, he says, dismissing himself. On his next visit, Friar Tuck informs the men of the sheriff's interrogation of his travels. He also tells them his mead supply is low, and it would be a while before he could come back through the forest. You're a good man, Friar, for all you have done. We will find another way, says Robin. We can't keep on like this, Little John announces. We need to take a stand. We need the townsfolk to rally behind us and take down this corruption. The townsfolk would not be opposed to fighting back, but there are a few who can wield a sword, and many have not a sword to wield, informs the friar. We will come up with something. Keep those you trust informed. The day we take back the kingdom is near, states Robin. The friar heads back to the castle with his last shipment of goods for the townspeople. Only this time he is greeted by the sheriff and several of his men. Good evening, friar, welcomes the sheriff. I take it your trip was met with little resistance. Yes, for which I am grateful. A small gesture of good faith goes a long way, he says, anxiously. Does it now? Questions the sheriff. I will have to take that into consideration. He signals his men to help the friar unload his wagon. It is nothing I can't handle, Sheriff. The sheriff stops one of the guards and knocks the clay pot out of his hand. Coins and bits of food scatter with the pieces of pot. Well now, friar, it would seem like my good faith in you has been misplaced. He orders his soldiers to arrest the friar and take him to the dungeon for aiding an enemy of the king. The following week, Moira is with Ada and some of the children playing in the camp. Robin and Will watch them as they tend to the weapons for the revolt. I've been meaning to ask you, says Robin to Will. How did you... when did you... Will interrupts. How did I know Ada was the one? I, asked Robin nervously. A little birdie flew down and told me, jokes Will. Robin looks at him unamused. I just did it. It felt right, informs Will. Why? Thinking about asking Moira to wed? No, I mean, not that I wouldn't want to, he stutters. I just don't think now is the time, with the revolt and everything. One of the men signals Robin of an approaching wagon. He walks down towards the trail with Little John. Friar wasn't supposed to be back so soon, Little John says uneasily. The familiar wagon belonging to Friar Tuck pulls up to a halt. Good day, Friar, says Duncan, approaching the wagon with its driver hooded. How's the mead on this lovely day? The driver throws back his shroud and reveals himself to be a soldier of the king. More of the king's men reveal themselves from under a tarp covering the back of the wagon. Several of Robin's men attack. Moira and Ada hear the commotion and see several soldiers approaching on horseback. We've got to get everyone out of here. Go! She sends Ada on her way with all the children. The camp's people, alerted by a watchman, take off through to the evacuation route. Moira runs over to a tree near the main entry point to the camp and cuts a rope. It sends a swinging log down onto the path of several soldiers, knocking them off of their horses. A foot soldier comes sliding down a rocky slope behind her. Turning, she stabs him in the shoulder with a knife between his armor. She loses her balance and falls back as he swings his sword erratically while she gets up and runs. The two soldiers whom she knocked off their horses get to their feet to confront her. Robin fires two arrows simultaneously hitting each in the neck at the base of their helmets. Run! Make sure everyone makes it to safety, he yells. She turns and heads into the camp as fast as she could. A small child separated in the chaos was screaming for her mom. Moira notices the woman frantically searching for her lost child in the crowd and grabs the girl. After handing her off, a soldier makes his way towards Moira. She runs up the stairs into the canopy of huts. The soldier lunges, grabbing a hold of her foot, yanking her down a few steps. She kicks his head, causing his helmet to spin around and snap shut as she takes off again. Another soldier, riding towards the people evacuating, treads beneath the canopy of huts. She jumps down from the ledge of branches and knocks the rider off. Quickly getting up, she runs towards the people as they flee. Something doesn't feel right, says Robin as he fires a few more arrows from behind the cover of trees as they retreat closer to camp. How so? Says Little John, catching his breath. You give the sheriff too much credit if you think he could stage a worthy attack against us. The coward can't even lead his men into battle, mocks Duncan as he swings his warhammer into the chest of a soldier. The camp's people don't get too far when another group of soldiers shows up, led by the sheriff, cuts them off. He trots his horse over to Moira. My dear, I've been looking all over for you, he says, sounding as concerned as he can. I think it's time you come with me, he says, holding out his hand. I'm not going anywhere with you, she proclaims. I was trying to be pleasant about all this. He points to one of the soldiers, who yanks a child from his mother's arms. He then removes a small dagger and places it against the child's throat. Please, exclaims the mother. Stop, yells Moira, hanging her head. Let the boy and people go. I will return with you. That's a good girl, he says, smiling mischievously. The soldier puts the boy back down and Moira mounts the sheriff's horse. Not taking any chances with her rebellious spirit, he knocks her unconscious with the butt end of his sword. Robin emerges from the camp to see Moira in the sheriff's arms. Moira! He yells, taking aim, but doesn't risk the shot for fear it would injure her. He curses and feels his heart sink as the sheriff rides off with her and his men. Moira awakens back at the castle in the sheriff's quarters. She quickly sits up, recognizing the room, and notices she's wearing a pink sleeping gown. She pulls the blanket back and finds one of her legs shackled to the bedpost. The door opens and she pulls the blanket back across her, covering her indecent garments. You're awake, I see, acknowledges the sheriff. No doubt trying to escape back to Robin. He walks over to her and sweeps her hair from her face. I had hoped instead he might come to you. He will, says Moira fiercely, her eyes piercing into his. I am counting on it. And when he does, he will be captured by my men and executed. After our ceremony. I know how much it would mean to have him there. What ceremony? She asks skeptically as he pours himself a glass of wine. Our wedding, of course. The king has decided that since the friar is to be hanged, he himself would marry us. I'd never marry a filthy, conniving, disgusting... The sheriff slaps her across the face. She cringes with her hand on her cheek as the pain radiates like fire. There will be enough of that, he yells before chugging the wine. I will have you as my bride, and I will have Robin Hood's head by tomorrow evening. He throws the glass into the flaming fireplace before storming out of the room. Moira screams in frustration. Helpless, she has no way out and no way to warn Robin. Little John informs Robin he has sent Hatcher, one of the men from the camp, and his son into the city to keep an ear out for anything on Moira. In the meantime, they prepare for their revolt. 4 of the men return to the hideout, bringing chests full of weapons and armor taken from guards during their raids. Robin steps away from the castle blueprints laid out by Duncan. He walks over to a nearby tree, rubbing his head. It won't be long until you have her back, says Will, walking over to lend his support. His words fell on deaf ears. I should have took the shot, he says in anguish. I should have put one right in his skull, gestures Robin. He's going to hope that you're reckless enough on your quest to retrieve her that he gets the advantage. Robin sighs, knowing that Will is right. If he doesn't keep a cool head, he will slip up and all hopes of getting her back will be gone. Ever since his first encounter with the sheriff, he knew he lusted for her. Robin just wanted her back before he exploited her for his own perverse pleasure. We both know Moira is no pushover. He's probably regretting laying eyes on her to begin with, quips Will, finally getting a scarce smile from Robin. Later that afternoon, Hatcher and his son return, bringing unwelcomed news. The friar has been jailed, and is to be hanged tomorrow morning. Damn, says Little John, shaking his head in disbelief. Anything on Moira? Asks Robin. Hatcher looks at him uneasily. There is to be a ceremony after the friar is hanged. The sheriff and Moira will be wed after, at sundown, he confirms. Robin balls his fist and breathes deep, trying to calm himself. Rescuing her may prove to be more than a challenge as well. The sheriff has increased the bounty on your head to 100 pounds, dead or alive. Many of the townsfolk are desperate and starving. Their loyalty may be wavering." "No," insists Little John. "They are desperate for change, but they are loyal to our cause." The men review a map of the city grounds, including the castle, and they start devising a plan.